This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Two Ebola patients cured by experimental treatments in the DR Congo. Over 500 rescued migrants on two NGO ships remain stranded in the Mediterranean. A Ugandan man creates a box garden to help urban farmers in cultivating. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche?
Thank you, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. Zambia urges Glencore to reverse mine shaft closures that could lead to 1,400 job losses. And a report shows Africa needs $1.4 trillion to improve affordable housing across the continent. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. We begin in the DRC, where two people have been cured by experimental treatments. The pair had been part of a group of 4 diagnosed with the disease in Goma. They have so far been reunited with their families. They had taken part in the trial treatment with scientists using 4 drugs in efforts to cure the hemorrhagic fever. The drugs were developed using antibodies harvested from Ebola survivors. The 2 drugs, Rain EB3, MAB114, both drugs resulted in 60% of the 681 tested patients surviving. The drugs can cure 90% of patients if they are treated early. They will now be used to treat Ebola patients around the country. The World Health Organization is welcoming the news of effective Ebola treatments. The world body, though, added community engagement is still needed to stop the current outbreak. CGTN's Astatal has more.
Ebola is now a curable disease. It's good news for the DRC, which has been battling the worst outbreak in its history. After trial testing 4 experimental drug treatments, 2 of those drugs emerged as the most effective treatment methods.
The preliminary results in 499 study participants indicated that those individuals receiving Regeneron or MAB114 had a greater chance of survival compared to those participants with the other 2. These are great news, of course, and these news will save lives and moves us closer to finding an effective treatment for Ebola.
The treatments are most effective when a patient is diagnosed early on.
So let's not forget, we now have a vaccine which is highly efficacious. We have treatment which really shows good data. So overall, this is positive news. And these are great new tools or great tools for our toolbox. But it doesn't stop Ebola alone. What will stop Ebola, under the leadership of the government in the DRC, is good surveillance, good infection prevention and control, good community engagement, and excellent vaccinations.
The drugs will now be offered in 14 treatment centers across the country. Astatal, CGTN.
We earlier spoke to Dr. Janet Diaz. She is the team leader for the clinical and infectious hazard management at the World Health Organization, and this is what she had to say.
The 2 drugs that have been shown by the preliminary analysis of the randomized controlled trial named the PALM study are called Regeneron and MAB114. And both drugs are monoclonal antibodies that bind directly to the Ebola virus protein and in that way stop the production and replication of the virus. So the impact, I think there can be tremendous impact. The preliminary data is very, very promising, showing that there is a significant improvement in survival, so reduction in deaths due to Ebola virus disease. Well, the good news is that since the beginning of the outbreak in DRC, nearly since the beginning, maybe just 1 week into the outbreak we were delayed, patients with Ebola virus disease have had access to the therapeutics. now, because we were enrolling into the randomized control trial, they were getting one of the 4 drugs. But patients have always have had access. And since we have this preliminary result, so since last Saturday, now we are exclusively using the 2 drugs that have been shown to be the most beneficial. And all patients now in the treatment units had access to these therapeutics. Well, at this moment in time, these therapeutics have, and all care provided in the treatment centers are provided free of cost. So we provide care for patients. We offer them therapeutics as well as optimized supportive care, so treatments of other potential medical conditions.
Well, for more on this, we are joined by Emmanuel Nta, a senior public relations officer with the Ministry of Health in Uganda. Emmanuel, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. First things first, Emmanuel, how important is this breakthrough in the fight against Ebola? Talk to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This is a good news that will finally see us have a very definitive treatment for Ebola.
Well, Emmanuel, moving on though, how accessible, I guess the question that really needs to be asked is how accessible and affordable will the drug be for Africans? Emmanuel.
Now that the drug has proved to be effective, the African countries working together with their partners will have to ensure that people who need the treatment are enrolled to care in the shortest possible time. And that means that working with our partners like the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, we hope that this drug will be made available and also be accessed by our patients at a very affordable and costly price.
All right, Emmanuel Nta, let's leave it there for now. Thank you for your insight and analysis. That's Emmanuel Nta speaking to us from Kampala, Uganda. Moving on, the success of these 2 drugs means Ebola has become a curable disease. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy takes a closer look at the RAIN EB3 Ebola vaccine and its potential impact.
The RAIN EB3, a cocktail of 3 therapeutic antibodies to treat Ebola, goes back to the 2014 Ebola outbreak, which killed more than 11,300 people. Scientists were able to develop and validate this new therapeutic drug in just 6 months, clearing the way for additional preclinical research in animal models and a phase 1 trial in healthy humans in 2015. In 2018, it took scientists 21 days working with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and World Health Organization to prepare and ship EB3 to the Democratic Republic of Congo after the May 10th Ebola outbreak began. The May 2018 Ebola outbreak ended relatively quickly. However, in October 2018, the Democratic Republic of Congo experienced a second and more prolonged outbreak in a different and more remote provinces of Ituri and Kivu. The outbreak saw scientists securing various regulatory approvals, country approvals, and import licenses to deliver EB3 to providers on the ground in the DRC. EB3 is part of the WHO's ethical framework known as Monitored Emergency Use of Unregistered and Investigational Interventions, which establishes certain criteria for access to investigational therapeutics outside of clinical trials.
We're confident in the measures we're put in place and hope that we will see no further transmission of Ebola in Goma.
Until recently, it was unclear if EB3 would be used during this particular Ebola outbreak in the DRC. Doctors are now optimistic that EB3 vaccine treatment will safely impact the course of the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Over 500 rescued migrants on board 2 rescue vessels remain stranded at sea as the NGO ships search for a safe port that will take them. The Ocean Viking ship, run by Doctors Without Borders, along with the Franco-German charity SOS Mediterranee, rescued 81 people on Sunday and another 105 on Monday. Spanish NGO Open Arms has been at sea for 12 days and still waiting for a safe port to disembark the 151 migrants it rescued. No European state member has asked the European Union to coordinate the disembarking among the countries. The impasse comes days after Italy had announced fines of more than $1 million for ships carrying unauthorized migrants that attempted to dock in the Italian ports without permission. It has ordered the seizure of such ships. Meanwhile, Hong Kong police have again called for social order to be restored. The call came during a press conference on Tuesday in response to the increasing tensions between the police and protesters.
It's only because someone has broken the law that the police have to enforce the law. Many innocent citizens and even visitors of Hong Kong have been unfairly affected by protesters' reckless actions. I hope the public will understand that the police use force only as a means to containing the violent situations, and we always use force with restraint. We never wish to see any injury or casualties. If you still believe in peaceful, rational, and non-violent expression of speech, I appeal to you to cut ties with all rioters. We appeal to you to not let violence become a new norm. Please join us in restoring the order of society.
Well, China is urging the U.S. congressmen to make a clean break from violent extremists in Hong Kong. The statement comes after U.S. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell accused Beijing of seeking to encroach on Hong Kong people's autonomy and freedom. Writing on Twitter, he said any violent crackdown would be completely unacceptable. The Commissioner's Office for China's Foreign Ministry in Hong Kong said Beijing deplores and firmly opposes groundless allegations. It accused the congressman of distorting the truth and sending out wrong signals to extremists. The office said that radical protesters had become more violent, and it said actions such as assaulting the police had trampled upon the rule of law and social order in Hong Kong. Protesters have threatened safety and stability and are testing the limits of the one country, two systems principle. Well, you are watching Africa Live. The news continues. We've got a lot more stories coming your way after the break, including a Ugandan man creates a box garden to help urban farmers in cultivating. Nigerian teens with smartphones crowdfund their way into films.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. In Uganda, one man has found a creative solution to improve household incomes in urban areas. He's created a farm box in a box rather. It's designed to help urban farmers with little spaces plant fruit and vegetables in any small space like walkways or verandas for themselves or to sell. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Farming in a box garden in the capital, Kampala. Moses Matovu designed this vertical farm out of wood to help households with little space for large-scale farming.
We put the first tray, put the soil, put the second tray, and that's how we do it. We just keep stacking trays together. We can even make it 5 feet or 10 feet high, but we are cognizant of the fact that the user must be able to operate the vermicomposting chamber. So it should be at the height where the user can easily access it.
The box farm contains a chamber in the middle where organic fertilizer is applied to boost yields. Up to 200 plants can be grown in these stacked trays of wood. Planting spots are left on each of the trays, and a farmer can be able to harvest enough vegetables for home consumption in this garden in a box. Matovu comes from a farming family, but when he moved to the city, he had nowhere to grow crops, so he came up with a box farming idea.
The land was very small. It was there was a lot of erosion going on. Each time we put sacks to grow crops, it was very hard. They would be washed away by the rains, and so we started using boxes, playing around with boxes, and that's when we eventually came up with this kind of box that you see, the vertical farm.
Matovu has sold his box farms to about 65 people in Kampala, many of them stay-home mothers. Each box farm goes for about $200. Doreen Atukunda says her box farm is her market and source of income.
Started with skuma wheat, and I even started selling to the neighbors. You know, when you have these many neighbors, give us some, because no, I'm selling. So I used to pluck like 7 leaves, 500, 7 leaves, 500. So at the end of the day, I used to eat and to sell a little bit of them.
Kampala's population has increased significantly in recent years, more than 20% in the last 3 years, reducing space for farming. Matovu hopes to craft out more space-saving farms to suit both low-income and high-income urban farmers so they can be able to earn sustainable income. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, these days, blockbuster and sci-fi films are usually created using sophisticated software. But in Nigeria, a group of teen filmmakers are making a name for themselves by using the everyday recycled items to shoot their films. As CGTN's Muhammad Abubakar reports, the youngsters hope to someday grace the country's multi-million-dollar Nollywood industry.
Godwin Josiah and his cousins are getting ready to shoot a movie scene.
And action.
With just a mere smartphone and a tripod made from a broken microphone stand, off they begin.
Well, the main aim was not for our stuff to go viral. We just wanted people to see that, okay, there are kids in Kaduna doing something different. So that was just the main aim. So it all of a sudden just happening, it blew our mind. It made us happy.
Today, blockbuster and sci-fi films are created with a sophisticated software. But that's not the case with these boys here in Nigeria's northwestern state of Kaduna. Instead of the usual multi-million-dollar production, they have opted for the everyday recycled items that are catapulting them into social media darlings.
But the target we aim for in the years to come is to make the biggest films in Nigeria and probably beyond. That's just the main aim. We want to do something crazy, we want to do something great, something that has not been done before. And from what has been going on now, we believe quite well it's going to happen soon enough.
The critics, as the crew of 8 like to call themselves, made their first film called Redemption in 2016. They saved for nearly a month and taught themselves how to do visual effects through YouTube. Battling slow internet and power cuts, they created a tale of 2 boys who create an organic biofuel.
The system is really slow, like it takes time to render. Like our 5-minute short film called Chase took us like almost 2 days to render, and not only the fact that this system is slow, the electricity where we stay here is pretty poor.
Nigeria's multi-million-dollar sector, Nollywood, is ranked the 2nd largest in the world by quantity of films produced. Its popular themes usually range from cannibalism to witchcraft. Just like many upcoming filmmakers, Josiah and his team are slowly diving their way into Nigeria's Nollywood culture. They have set their sights on the industry as they hope to grace its big screens someday. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
Well, let's head over to South Africa, where the latest Investec Gibbs Savings Index for South Africa shows that while South African households do save, this is canceled out by people who spend on credit cards, personal loans, and overdrafts to make ends meet. Angela Coppola has more.
The author of the index, Professor Adrian Saville, says that corporate South Africa is doing a good job saving and investing. But there's no one funding the small and medium enterprises. Traditionally, that money comes from friends and family, and they aren't saving enough to invest.
A common perception is that the only way that I can save is if I earn more. But what we've got from a raft of countries that start on low income basis is that saving is actually a learned behavior, and that if you cut your cloth to your circumstance.
People earning variable incomes are probably the most challenged when it comes to saving.
As tough as it is, I am able to put some away. I'm planning to start something because I can't be working forever. At some point, I have to be doing something for myself. So I am managing to put some away. It's not much.
Some find it tougher to save than others, but spoiling yourself once in a while isn't a bad idea.
I am able to save, but it's very tough because you end up with literally nothing to spend on yourself. So it's a bit difficult to and you end up dabbling into your savings a little bit, which is not healthy.
Saving for particular goals is critical. The experts will tell you that having these goals provides focus.
I'm saving towards my studies at the moment. That's the first thing that I'm saving towards, and the next thing would be a car and then a house and so on.
Saving to attain specific goals is hard work, and it will involve sacrifices.
Some things that I'm sacrificing here, especially on food. There are some that, if you look at it, it might be luxury if you look at it. So you have to sacrifice. Sometimes you just buy things to survive.
I become very disciplined. Anyone who tries to borrow money, it's a no, I don't have it. You basically become like a mean person in a way. But if you want your things to go in order, you have to make a little bit of sacrifices.
A savings culture in any country, in any household, is a learnt behavior, and the sooner we start to learn it, the sooner we can start saving.
So the best way to become a saver is to do exactly that, to start saving. How much? 1 is a number to start with.
I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Sandton, South Africa.
The Prime Minister of Tunisia has decorated a number of women active in various sectors, including media, culture, and sports. He promised that more women will be appointed as governors, delegates, and CEOs of public companies. Tunisia aims to guarantee more women's rights and to remain one of the leading countries in this field in Africa and the Arab world. CGTN's Adnan Shawalshi has that story.
On the occasion of the National Women's Day, Tunisian Premier Youssef Chahed called for increasing women's access to decision-making positions.
Full gender equality has not been achieved yet, and women's presence in decision-making positions remain below expectations. The issue of gender equality is a shared responsibility.
Authorities say the state has evaluated the progress made in the country in order to better understand the needs of Tunisian women in comparison to women worldwide.
The world will celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women, which was held in China, and the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action. Tunisia and the international community need to shed light on the achievements in women's rights since the Chinese conference.
The government announced a set of measures in favor of women, including the right to free vaccination against cervical cancer for 700,000 girls aged between 12 and 14 years. In addition, mammography will be made free to women aged 40 and over who are affiliated with the social security system.
This is a good decision that will save the lives of young girls and women who can also benefit from early detection and treatment of cancer.
We feel free and independent in Tunisia, but we must continue our quest for more women's rights.
The Prime Ministry announced that about $3.2 million will be paid to the Tunisian Solidarity Bank to purchase transport vehicles for female farmhands. The Ministry of Justice has registered nearly 40,000 complaints filed by women who are victims of violence in 2019. Experts believe that the actual number is much higher than the reported figure. Authorities say that fighting violence against women is one of the main priorities of the state. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
A paper recycling initiative has been launched in Addis Ababa, employing primarily returning migrant women. 40 deposit sites on wheels have sprung up in the Ethiopian capital, allowing residents to dispose their paper waste for a fee. Coletta Wanjohi reports.
Haimanot Shitao used to be homeless. Now she earns $74 a month operating a paper waste collection bike. The initiative is called Walk a Bike, and it has helped turn around the lives of many women.
With this job, my life has improved greatly. I can afford to rent a house. As a woman, I'm empowered. I can work and support my child on my own.
When paper is brought to be deposited, Haimanot sorts it to ensure it can be recycled. The depositors weigh what they have brought and receive money in return. For 14 kilos, they are given $1. On a good day, Haimanot collects between 600 and 800 kilograms of paper. Penda Paper, the company behind the project, is a paper recycling company. It says this is a mutually beneficial system.
One Work a Bike has one woman, but that's not the only person that's basically kind of benefiting from it. As you've seen, there's different collectors that come every day, and they've made it their, somewhat you can say, their daily means. That's how they are making their money now. So we have a lot of these collectors on each bike, up to 10 people that are individuals, collectors, that bring this paper to just get money for the day so that they can have some kind of means.
The company plans to add 210 more bikes by next year. With a population of over 5 million people, Addis Ababa is estimated to be growing at a rate of about 4%. Waste produced will rise with it. Garbage collection is an issue that city officials have been grappling with, so any innovative solutions are welcome. The project is also providing opportunities for returned migrants. Many Ethiopian women who were victims of illegal migration struggle to find jobs when they come home.
If you look at returnees from Saudi Arabia, or, for instance, or even from destination countries like South Africa, you'll notice that over 90% of them were engaged in some kind of economic activity. So they were not sitting idle in their countries of destination, they were working. So upon return to Ethiopia, migrants want to work. They want opportunities to improve themselves economically. And I think the partnership with Penda Paper creates such opportunities for them.
The walker bikes may only make a small contribution to waste collection, but the contribution to the lives of women in Ethiopia is much greater. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Date palm wines are popular in Sudan and North Africa. In Tunisia, locals enjoy a delicately made date palm juice often served during meals, breaking the fast in the Middle East. Let's take a look at that story.
A producer of the Tunisian date palm beverage must have an expert hand and not be too greedy to draw the sap from the palm, or else could risk killing it. That's the delicate balance of art and craft in making the prized local brew known as legmi.
When choosing the palm tree and before making the cut, it is necessary to choose a big and mature palm tree for good quality legmi to drink and a good amount of juice extraction.
As soon as the sun is up, people in southern Tunisia rush out to buy a glass or bottle of legmi, a coveted palm date drink that is too delicate to be sold far from the oasis.
Every day I sell between 40 and 50 liters from spring until October. In November it gets colder. People want warmer things to eat and drink, so they do not want cold.
Rida Omran is in his 60s and has been harvesting the nectar for decades, since learning the technique at the age of 14 from a relative in the oasis of Nahal. He now refers to himself as the prince of the palm tree.
In the summer, legmi has its own specifications and not everyone can make it. In summer, it is fragile because of the heat. The temperature is very, very high. It is fragile, so it cannot sit in the heat because it rots and becomes vinegar.
A 1.5-liter bottle sells for just under $1, and even at its fairly priced rate and roughly bottled state, the brew is delectable.
It's our breakfast here because it's full of good sugar. It gives people energy. There are people, instead of having a croissant and coffee, have legmi instead. Legmi is good for the body.
The legmi is a palm juice. We are used to consuming it especially in the morning and sometimes even in the afternoon. I came here to buy legmi, especially because I have guests who are here for a wedding in Tunis and I want to please them with legmi.
So every harvest, Rida carefully cuts the bark, but is keen not to touch the heart of the palm tree, otherwise it dies. He harvests from each tree before letting them rest for 4 years, producing around 8,000 liters annually. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Right, you're watching Africa Live on CGTN. The news continues. Right over to Uche, who has our business headlines.
Thanks, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Zambia urges Glencore to reverse its mine shaft closures that could lead to 1,400 job losses. And we look at a report that shows Africa needs $1.4 trillion to improve affordable housing across the continent.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Zambia. The country's mining ministry has asked Glencore subsidiary Mopani Copper Mines to rescind its decision to close 2 shafts in the country. Now, last Thursday, Mopani announced the shutdown, citing that the decision had always been part of its plans. According to the firm, the move will allow it to channel funds towards the completion of its other expansion projects. Located in the Copper Belt province of central Zambia, Mopani produces and sells copper and cobalt for markets worldwide. However, Mopani is yet to confirm how many jobs will be lost by the last non-renewal of contracts associated with the closure of the 2 uneconomic shafts at its Nkana site. And in Nigeria, the 6-year electricity deal, which was signed by the country and the German-based firm Siemens, is expected to require more than $3.2 billion to execute. Now, the three-phase Nigerian electrification project aims to achieve about 25,000 megawatts of electricity by 2025. It was first outlined in a meeting between Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari and German Chancellor Angela Merkel last August. For decades, Nigeria has been experiencing an energy supply crisis, with only around 40% of its population connected to power. However, the latest Siemens plan is set to improve the West African country's capacity to deliver electricity across its value chain. Well, let's move to housing in Africa now. According to Pan-African housing development financier Shelter Afrique, Africa needs more than $1.4 trillion in funding in order to be able to effectively address the growing housing crisis. Now, the firm says a majority of African countries are already facing a housing crisis as a result of high population growth, increased urbanization, poor urban planning, and dysfunctional land markets. That's amongst other issues. Shelter Afrique has signed a memorandum of understanding with Habitat for Humanity International. The MOU will see Habitat for Humanity assist Shelter Afrique in mobilizing capital for affordable housing. And in Kenya, Kisumu, in the western part of the country, has undergone rapid growth in terms of infrastructure. Now, in just under 10 years, the lakeside city has seen an increase in highways and bridges that have extensively transformed its status. Well, now, in conjunction with the national government, local authorities are set to commission its reconstructed port that has otherwise been dormant for the last 20 years. CGTN's Terry Wangari deciphers what this could mean for the residents in the greater Lake Victoria Basin.
Kisumu City is on track in commissioning its newly rehabilitated port, which is situated on Lake Victoria in the western region of Kenya. The port has been underutilized for years, despite its immense potential and strategic positioning to serve the landlocked countries in the Great Lakes region. This has been blamed on the invasion of hyacinth, which is a weed that grows uncontrollably in the lake, a poor transport system, and the state of its landing sites. In 2017, the Kenyan government signed an agreement with China Exim Bank for a $140 million loan to finance its construction. The newly refurbished port is also the county government's plan to rearrange the city's geological structure to favor economic activity.
There's one unfortunate thing that Kisumu as a city, or as a town for that matter, where it started, grew with its back to the lake. If you look at the shops in front of the lake on Obote Road, they turn their backs to the lake, which is very unfortunate because in most towns or cities on waterfronts, facilities always turn their front to the lake and then interact with the lakefront economy to their own advantage.
In its heyday, the Kisumu port was an important passenger and cargo hub. It interlinked Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania through the Port Bell, Jinja, Bukoba, and Mwanza ports. Uganda, which is the main user of the port, accounts for more than 90% of cargo due to its landlocked nature. With its recent reconstruction, the port hopes to revive trade and economic ties within the Lake Victoria Basin.
Kenya Pipeline Company has built a jetty on the other side of the lake, not on this side, near the airport, past the KPC depot there. And that jetty is going to put petroleum products into tankers and ships destined for points around the lake in Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and so on. And so that is for bringing in revenue.
So the lakefront development on the side of Kisumu aims at improving all the infrastructure around this other side, so that marine transport or marine transport, which is envisaged, can be possible. Yeah, and at the same time, it will not just be marine; it will also be the transports, passengers moving from Kisumu within East Africa and within Kenya.
The current export tonnage at Kisumu port stands at 21,000 tons, Once the revamped port is commissioned, the Kenya Ports Authority expects this figure to grow to up to 410,000 tons monthly by 2035. Terry Wangari, CGTN, Kisumu, Kenya.
And to food matters now. Over the past few years, Uganda has been experiencing a remarkable rice boom. It has been supported by good farming practices, premium market prices, as well as favorable policies that have stimulated large private investment in its rice sector. Well, the East African nation is currently attracting attention as a potential rice basket for the East African region, contributing to greater food security and a reduction in rice imports. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy brings us more on that.
Africa consumes a total of 11.6 million tons of milled rice per year, of which 3.3 million tons are imported. According to officials, as many as 21 of the 39 rice-producing countries in Africa import between 50 and 99% of their rice requirements. Uganda is now concentrating on local farmers to boost rice production in all regions, including the planting of new variety of drought-resistant upland rice. Jimmy Lamore is a rice breeder at Uganda's National Agricultural Research Organization. He is one of the scientists who developed Uganda's new rice varieties that grow in soils with less nutrients and no fertilizer use.
We have developed varieties that are drought tolerant, and they take a shorter time. So in case rain tails very fast, you still get your crop from the field.
The focus has now shifted from increasing rice production to improving post-harvest handling, value addition and marketing.
Government is going to build more irrigation schemes, and I think that will be also positive in terms of rice production. So I think we're hopeful that in the next 2-3 years we shall be able to double our production.
According to data by the Ministry of Agriculture, Uganda exports 40,000 to 50,000 metric tons of rice to South Sudan, DR Congo, Kenya and some Middle Eastern countries. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And moving on now, European travel and tourism operator TUI says that robust business has outweighed problems with the grounding of Boeing 737 MAX jets in its third quarter. Now, the travel and tourism operator has upheld its earnings outlook for the full year. It stuck to its guidance for underlying earnings before interest, taxes and amortization, otherwise known as EBITDA, to fall by up to 26% from last year when it was $1.32 billion. Now, amortization is the process of gradually writing off the initial cost of an asset. Underlying core earnings declined by 46% year-on-year to around $113 million. TUI CEO Fritz Jussen cited efficiency drives and cost reductions, but he did note uncertainty around Brexit, aviation overcapacity to Spain, as well as delayed bookings in the summer. Now, despite uncertainty in global markets due to the China-US trade war, overseas investment into China still remains strong this year. Let's take a look.
China is still attractive to overseas investors. Latest government data shows China received $79 billion of investments from overseas in the first 7 months of the year, an increase of nearly 4% compared with the same period a year ago.
High-tech sectors saw significant growth. Aircraft and spacecraft equipment, electronics, telecommunication equipment, and medicine received over 30% more of overseas investment compared to the same period of last year. Foreign investment in high-tech services also grew more than 60%.
The China-US trade war is taking its toll. A survey by the American Chamber of Commerce in China shows that 65% of its member companies are concerned about the trade tension and are tempering their business strategies accordingly. Amid this, however, government data shows China is enjoying optimistic growth in foreign investment.
Investment from China's major source of foreign capitals is not slowing down. Investment from Germany and South Korea has increased about 70%.
Businesses are on edge as long as the trade dispute remains unresolved. But amid all that, the same survey from the American Chamber of Commerce shows 62% of companies still see China as one of their top 3 global investment priorities. Rob Rashke, CGTN.
Well, now let's update one of our top stories today. Protests at Hong Kong's international airport turned violent a few hours ago. Protesters clashed with police after flights were disrupted for a second day. Now, Hong Kong's airport authority says operations at the airport had been seriously disrupted and that departing passengers had been unable to reach immigration counters. A journalist from the Beijing-based Global Times newspaper was assaulted and seriously injured by the rioters. Witnesses say that the man was wearing a yellow high-visibility vest and that protesters were demanding to see his press ID. Now, the rioters pinned him to the ground, seized his belongings and draped an "I Love HK Police" t-shirt over him as others tried to step in and stop the violence. The journalist was later rescued by Hong Kong police and received a medical treatment on site. Of course, we'll bring you more highlights as they come in. Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, South Africa's largest platinum mining union rejects wage offers from two of the world's biggest producers. We'll bring you more on that. Top of the hour. For now, back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a lot more wonderful, amazing, and inspiring stories coming your way. Let's take a look. The UN warns that about 3,500 languages could go extinct by the year 2100.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Tanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. As the United Nations General Assembly recognizes 2019 as International Year of Indigenous Languages, many Africans are pushing for greater recognition for theirs. The UN warns that of the world's almost 7,000 languages, half could go extinct by the year 2100. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa, where African representatives met with the UN's cultural body, UNESCO.
The Oromo is a culture found across parts of both Kenya and Ethiopia. Its traditional leadership system, called the Gada, ensures leadership changes hands every 8 years. It is recognized by UNESCO as an intangible world heritage.
I'm Kenyan, but Ethiopian Gada system is our law too. We respect it.
But westernization is threatening culture like this. Isabel Zaug is a researcher in Ethiopian languages. She says most indigenous languages are not used in areas like computer systems, and people are therefore more exposed to foreign languages.
Primarily, digital tools are being developed because of market demand. But some of these language communities they're not large. They may not have a lot of money, but they still deserve support for their languages rather than being basically, pushed by the tools to adopt languages or scripts that really they don't feel are their own.
According to the UN, there are about 370 million people worldwide who belong to indigenous communities. UNESCO predicts that by the end of this century, between 50 to 90% of indigenous languages will have been lost. That is why Africans are seeking help to preserve the approximately 2,000 native languages on the continent. Jennifer Koinante comes from the Yaku tribe in Kenya, which has only 6,000 people. She says preservation must begin at home.
In African, we are intermarrying. That's okay. But everybody have the language. Why don't we say that we have to speak our language, one of the languages, or the two parents? So parents have a role to play, a very crucial one. Because a language taught is different from a language that you learn when we are very young. So it is supposed to start from home.
Some Africans want Kiswahili, a language from Eastern Africa, to become one of UN's official languages. UNESCO is now collecting proposals from people around the world on how to preserve their native tongues. For the Oromia community, one way of keeping the culture going is by passing wisdom to the next generation of leaders. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, this is Africa Live, and we've got your sports news coming up after the break. Don't touch that dial. Here's what's ahead. Teams in last-minute preparations ahead of the African Games in Morocco.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, we begin with the very latest on the upcoming 2019 African Games in Morocco, where teams are putting final touches to their preparations. Egypt has lined up their heavyweight muscle men in weightlifting, looking to lift the country to the top of their overall medal standings. CGTN's Adel El Maroui reports from Cairo.
Weightlifting is one of Egypt's most successful sports. This year, the players are putting extra effort in training